She owned no palace, yet every heart she entered felt like a kingdom. The world passed her by, without bowing, without noticing the quiet crown resting on her soul. She walked in worn shoes, but her footsteps carried dignity that silk could never learn. They measured her life in what she lacked: empty pockets, faded walls, hands roughened by time. But no one measured how she loved, how she gave without counting, how she stayed when leaving would have been easier. She was poor in wealth, yes, but royal in love, and love bowed to no currency. Her mornings began with struggle. Her nights ended with prayers, spoken softly so pain wouldn't hear. She cooked hope in broken kitchens, served warmth from cold hands, and wrapped her family in patience stitched from sacrifice. When the world was cruel, she answered with mercy. When life grew heavy, she lifted others before lifting herself. She never asked why her share was smaller. She simply shared it anyway. There was a grace in her silence, a power in her endurance. She did not shine loudly, but like the moon, she ruled the dark. Without asking permission, people mistook her simplicity for weakness, never realizing that only the strongest hearts choose kindness again and again. In a ruthless world, her love was not loud poetry. It was daily survival, unchronicled heroism, the kind of devotion that never trends, but never dies. She was unseen, yet unforgettable, uncelebrated, yet eternal, not rich by the world's standards, but crowned by heaven's measure. And this is where her story begins. She woke before the sun, not because she owned a clock, but because responsibility never learned how to sleep. Her morning smelled of worn floors and silent prayers, of tea brewed thin yet shared thick with hope. The world measured wealth in noise and numbers, but her riches lived quietly, folded into simple moments no one applauded. She wore the same dress like a loyal memory, patched, faded, but never ashamed. Each thread knew struggle by name. Each wrinkle carried a story the world refused to read. People passed her like an old street they thought led nowhere, not knowing it led straight to the heart. Her hands were rough, not from holding gold, but from holding life together. When it tried to fall apart, she carried hunger with dignity and disappointment with grace, teaching pain how to behave inside a tired body. She never asked fate for mercy, only for strength to keep loving, even when love gave nothing back. When storms arrived, she became the roof. When silence screamed, she became the answer. They called her poor because she owned no land, no titles, no shining proof of success. But they never saw how her heart ruled kingdoms of patience, loyalty, and faith. She fed others before herself, smiled while swallowing her fears, and believed in tomorrow, even when today had already taken too much. Her love didn't need witnesses. It needed purpose. She stood small in crowded rooms, yet her presence felt heavy, like truth walking without permission. No crown touched her head, but her soul bowed to none. In a world obsessed with taking, she mastered the art of giving. In a life that offered little, she offered everything. She was poor in wealth, yes, but royal in love, and that made all the difference. She learned early that hunger has many faces. Some sit in the stomach, others sleep quietly in the heart. At 60, her hands are thin, veins like old rivers that have carried storms for decades. They tremble sometimes, not from weakness, but from how much they have given, and how little they have kept. She never owned a house that the world would admire, Walls were cracked. Ceilings whispered rain. Floors remembered bare feet. Yet every corner knew her prayers. Every shadow knew her patience. She cooked hope when there was no salt. She fed dreams when there was no bread. And somehow, we survived. Her life was a long conversation with sacrifice. She spoke softly. Sacrifice listened closely. They became friends. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world sleeps, and mothers stay awake, counting worries like stars, she aged not by years, but by moments. Moments when she chose others over herself. Moments when she smiled, so no one would notice how tired her soul had become. People saw poverty and looked away. They never saw the wealth hidden behind her silence. They never measured love the way she gave it, without conditions, without return, without fear of loss. At 60, her back bends slightly, as if bowing to a lifetime of endurance. Her eyes carry stories no book has written, truths no voice has dared to speak. She is not broken. She is forged by storms, by nights with empty cupboards, by days when love was the only currency that never lost its value. And if the world still calls her poor, let it, because I know she paid the price of love in full and made me rich in ways money could never understand. She never wore a crown, yet dignity rested on her head like an unseen jewel. Her clothes were stitched with patience, threaded by nights that knew hunger, by mornings that rose without complaint. At 60, her hands told stories before her lips ever did. Lines etched by work, creases carved by sacrifice, palms that had learned the weight of responsibility long before they learned the comfort of rest. She did not count years by birthdays. She counted them by people she fed, by tears she wiped in silence, by dreams she folded away, so others could unfold their own. The world looked at her and saw lack, empty pockets, a small house, a life without applause. But the world never looked long enough, because if it had paused, just for a moment, it would have seen an empire built of endurance. She knew the language of scarcity, yet she spoke only generosity. She knew the taste of loss, yet she served love in full portions. When life gave her less, she gave life more. When fate tightened its grip, she loosened hers and let kindness breathe. At 60 she carried pain like a folded letter in her heart, never burned, never forgotten, but never read aloud either. She understood that strength does not announce itself. It whispers, I will continue. Her laughter was not loud, but it was honest. Her smile did not beg for attention, yet it healed wounds. She had learned that luxury is not silk or gold, but peace at the end of a hard day, and love that does not ask for proof. She was poor in wealth, yes, but royal in love. A queen without a throne, ruling through mercy, governing through patience, commanding respect, without ever demanding it. Time tried to humble her, but she was already humble. Life tried to break her, but she had already bent, and learned how not to snap. At 60 she stood, not tall because of pride, but steady because of faith. And if you listened closely, you could hear it in her silence. A quiet declaration to the world. You can take everything from me, but you will never take the love I choose to give. She never learned the language of abundance, yet she spoke fluently in patience. Her days were stitched together with small sacrifices, threads so thin the world never noticed them, but strong enough to hold an entire family upright. At 60, her hands told stories before her lips ever did. Lines carved by years of work, palms rough from giving more than they received. She woke before the sun, not because life demanded it, but because love never liked to arrive late. She owned no jewelry, yet her presence carried a quiet royalty, not the kind that sits on thrones, but the kind that stands in kitchens, counting breaths instead of coins, measuring wealth in whether everyone ate, whether everyone slept in peace. When hunger knocked, she answered with silence, pushing her share toward others, pretending she was already full of air and hope. The world saw poverty in her house, but missed the empire in her heart. She taught without books, educated us with examples. She showed how dignity survives even when money doesn't, how love can be firm without being loud, how strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply stays. At 60, her back bent slightly forward, not from weakness, but from carrying years on her shoulders that were never meant to be light. Still, she smiled like someone who had already forgiven life for being hard. She never asked fate for fairness. She only asked for enough strength to keep loving without bitterness. And fate, confused by such grace, stepped back and watched her win quietly. If riches were measured by endurance, she would be counted among queens. If love were a currency, her hands would overflow. She was poor in wealth, yes, but royal in love. And that kind of royalty never fades with age. She never learned the language of riches, yet she spoke fluently in sacrifice. Her hands were rough with years of giving, palms mapped with invisible scars, each line a promise she once made to life, and never broke. The world counted success in numbers, but she counted it in heartbeats survived. One more morning where the sun found her standing. One more night where love did not abandon her door. She lived quietly, but her silence carried the weight of mountains. At 60, her back bent slightly forward, not from weakness, but from decades of bowing to responsibility. She bent to lift burdens no one thanked her for, bent to wipe tears she was never allowed to cry, bent so others could stand taller in tomorrow. Her clothes were simple, yet dignity walked beside her like royalty. No crown touched her head, but patience rested there like gold. No palace knew her name, yet every broken heart recognized her warmth. She knew hunger, not just of the stomach, but the hunger of being unseen. Still, she fed others first, as if love were an endless river, flowing only from her chest. When life tested her, she did not shout back. She answered with endurance. When fate closed doors, she learned to sit peacefully in hallways, trusting that waiting itself was a form of faith. She lost things, money, chances, youth, but never misplaced her kindness. Even when bitterness knocked, she refused to let it stay. Her heart remained a home, not a battlefield. Time carved wrinkles on her face, each one a chapter of survival. If you looked closely, you could read courage between those lines. You could hear prayers whispered into pillows. You could feel love that never learned how to quit. She was poor in wealth, yes, but royal in love. A queen without a throne, ruling quietly over pain, governing sorrow with mercy, and wearing grace like it was stitched into her soul. And if the world still failed to notice her worth, history will not, because love like hers does not fade. It echoes. She walked with a quiet grace the world never taught her, a grace born from patience, not privilege. Her steps were slow, not from weakness, but from the weight of years spent standing for others. 60 years rested on her shoulders, yet she never asked anyone to carry them for her. The world measured success in loud victories, in shining cars and tall houses, but she measured life in smaller, truer things. A warm meal shared, a hand held in silence, a prayer whispered before sleep, while others chased crowns made of gold. She wore dignity like a simple scarf, never slipping, never fading. Her hands were rough, shaped by work and worry, but when they touched your face, they felt softer than mercy. Those hands had known hunger, had folded empty pockets, had counted coins and still come up short. Yet they never learned the habit of taking, only the art of giving. She knew what it meant to be unseen, to stand in rooms where no one asked her story, to exist in a world that passes by the poor, as if poverty were a choice, as if struggle were a flaw. Still, she never hardened. She never allowed bitterness to take shelter in her heart. At night, when the house grew quiet, she sat with her thoughts like old friends. Memories of loss, of sacrifices never applauded, of dreams postponed for the sake of love. She cried sometimes softly, so the walls wouldn't feel guilty. And when the tears dried, she rose again, stronger in spirit than before. She did not teach with speeches. She taught by example, by waking up even when tired, by smiling even when worried, by loving even when love gave nothing back. She showed that strength does not shout, and loyalty does not demand recognition. If the world had eyes sharp enough, it would bow before women like her. Women who build lives out of fragments, who turn scarcity into sanctuary, who prove that royalty is not born, it is lived. She was poor in wealth, but powerful in purpose, forgotten by the world, yet unforgettable to those who truly learned how to see. By 60, the world had already decided her value, measured her by empty pockets, by tired clothes, by hands that carried more scars than rings. They never asked what those hands had held. They never asked how many nights those hands stayed awake so others could sleep in peace. She walked slowly now, not because she was weak, but because she had learned that rushing never makes pain leave faster. Every wrinkle on her face was a road she had walked barefoot. Every gray strand of hair, a winter she survived without complaint. She did not complain about what she lacked. She spoke softly about what mattered. And somehow, that silence was louder than the noise of proud, wealthy lives. Her love had no price tag, no expiration date, no conditions hidden in small print. It was the kind of love that stays even when it gains nothing. When the world turned its back, she faced forward. When life tested her again and again, she answered with patience, not anger. She taught without classrooms, guided without authority, protected without weapons. Her strength was invisible, but unstoppable. At 60, she was not chasing dreams anymore. She had already lived them. Not the shiny kind, but the kind that keeps families standing when everything else collapses. People called her poor, but they never saw how rich it felt to be loved by someone who expected nothing in return. And maybe that is why even time itself walked gently around her, as if afraid to break what the world never managed to destroy. At this stage of her life, she no longer sought approval, for she had learned that true worth lies within, not in gold, not in praise, not in the fleeting glances of the world. Her heart, a sanctuary of love, remained unshaken by the storms of judgment, undaunted by the whispers of indifference. She gave love freely, without condition, without expectation, and in that giving, she became a legend of quiet power. Every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, was a seed planted in the soil of human hearts, blossoming into memories that would outlast the fleeting years. She walked through life with dignity, her steps measured, her gaze unwavering, carrying the invisible weight of decades, yet never burdening those who crossed her path. Though poverty marked her outwardly, her spirit radiated abundance, the richness of compassion, the wealth of empathy, the treasure of unwavering loyalty, were all hers in quantities unmatched by the opulent. Her love was a shield, her patience a beacon, her courage an unspoken song that inspired even the most hardened hearts. And when silence fell around her, it was not emptiness that lingered, but a presence, profound and enduring, a legacy etched into the soul she touched. Speech alone comment to honor her journey, share her story, and let the world see how true royalty lies in love, not riches. She reached the last chapter of her journey, not with sorrow, but with a heart overflowing with love. Not with regrets, but with wisdom carved from decades of struggle. Her life was a tapestry of invisible battles, each thread woven with silent strength, each knot tied with patience, each hue painted with the colors of enduring compassion. Though the world overlooked her, her heart never faltered, for love was her wealth, and kindness her currency. Every smile she shared was a gift, every word of encouragement a balm, every embrace a fortress of comfort for those fortunate enough to cross her path. Her eyes held the stories of 60 years, the laughter she gave freely, the tears she endured quietly, the lessons learned without classroom or teacher. She had no gold to her name, no luxury to boast, but her spirit radiated a richness that eclipsed the wealth of kings. Her love was not conditional, not measured by material gain, but given endlessly, like the sun that rises without asking for thanks, like the river that flows without pause. She was a guide, though she had no title, a queen, though she had no throne, a treasure, though the world could not see her worth. And as her story closes, it leaves a legacy greater than wealth, greater than fame, greater than any crown, a testament that love and resilience outshine all that the world esteems. Speech balloon comment to honor her legacy. Share your thoughts, and let the world know that true treasure lies not in gold, but in a heart that gives love endlessly.